do, but we're not sure how to be re-elected once we've done it. If you were to advise European politicians on how to bring about support to get welfare reforms and meet the challenges that you face, what would be your advice? Do you see any young Thatcherite-like reformers who can bring about the change we need?
It's interesting that you mention Margaret Thatcher. I've thought a lot about her since her death and reflected on what the lessons of 1980s Britain are. One obvious lesson is that structural reform, as we now euphemistically call it, is extremely politically difficult, and it requires very courageous leadership and a measure of luck to pull it off. If Margaret Thatcher had not been blessed by the stupidity of the Argentine junta, who chose to invade the Falkland Islands shortly before she had to seek re-election, she would have been a one-term prime minister. Between 1979 and 1982, the Thatcher government did an extraordinary series of things, more or less simultaneously. They addressed the problem of inflation through monetarist policy at the Bank of England. They addressed the problem of the excessive power of the trade unions, although the full showdown came somewhat later. They addressed the problem of chronic public deficits through very radical fiscal reform. The medicine was bitter. Unemployment went up. There was a deep recession as the inflation psychology was broken. And as I've said, the popularity of the government plummeted. And yet, only that kind of leadership will work. Only that kind of conviction will see a government through the kind of reforms that, frankly, most governments in Europe, and indeed in North America, are going to have to make. I'll take the case of Italy because it's, in some ways, the worst case. When I say that the rule of law in Italy declined steeply from the late 1990s, yesterday's verdict on the former Prime Minister kind of exemplifies what I'm talking about. To reform Italy is going to require more than what Gerhard Schröder did to the German labour market. Italy's reforms need to be root and branch to extend from the top to the bottom. It's not just a technical labour market problem, it's a rule of law problem. And it's going to take a far stronger government than the one that we currently see in Rome to do it. Is that government likely anytime soon? It's hard to be optimistic. So my regretful conclusion is that the Juncker calculation dominates in European politics. Nobody has the courage, including Angela Merkel, to risk defeat in elections, and so they pursue policies that are, by their very nature, guaranteed not to yield meaningful results. And since they usually lose anyway, with the exception of Angela Merkel, it's kind of doomed as a strategy. It may be that European democracies are no longer capable of producing effective and courageous leadership. And that's a possibility that we really need to take seriously. When I look at the quality of European politicians, it's hard to feel excitement. There are very few that I have met in the last 5 years who show any sign of having the kind of properties that made Margaret Thatcher such an extraordinarily successful leader. I'll name one. Poland's Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski is a rare exception to the rule. If I could make him president of the European Union and confer on him the powers of a British Prime Minister, I would do it tomorrow. But what is really sad is that he's the only name that springs to mind.